I think the number one thing about the criminal justice system is you have to ensure that people who go in once never go in again.
I had quite a rough childhood. My mum was a crack addict and my dad wasn't around. The only father figure I really had was my mum's partner, who was a huge drug taker. He'd take absolutely everything. Because I was always in an environment where there was drugs. In 2015, got into a little bit of debt because of selling and taking drugs and needed a way to get out of it. And my way to get out of it was to commit the crime that I actually did, which was a robbery. It was supposed to be quite easy to just, sort of snatch and grab rather than anyone get hurt in the process. Unfortunately, it didn't go that way.
At the age of 19, I was grateful to start my own business, but by 21, I was going to prison for committing an offence. And it was whilst I was in custody where I expected to see violence, anger, hopelessness from people because of what I've seen in the films, that I was shocked and surprised to see that there was actually people determined to turn their life around and move on from past mistakes.
Even if the start in a 10-year sentence, you have to start and think, what am I going to do when I get out? You are going to eventually get out, and you do need to do something with your life when you do get out.
So it's crucially important for prisoners to develop skills and education so they can get a job on release. And we know that the way that we get someone to be much less likely to reoffend is about them having a purpose, as well as a place, as well as people.
Most times, prisoners can't read and write properly, so they can't go out and apply for jobs. We need to sort that out when they're there. So ending reoffending isn't just about telling them to stop doing it, it's about changing their lives so that they can go out and then change their own lives.
We need to be responsible and be rehabilitating those people going into custody because they are going to be released, they are going to become our neighbours, and we would rather them be contributing members of society than going back to prison. It's encouraging to see that the government have done more with education in custody, or encouraging more education in custody, more employer-specific support, as well as release on temporary licence where work placements are people going from custody out to work for the day, back to custody, and that's incredible in terms of what it provides to a person with a conviction.
Progressing someone's educational and work opportunities will make society safer.
My job is to mentor and support ex-offenders and people who've been through the prison system. Because I've done some bad stuff in my life, I think if I'm able to give a little bit back to people and maybe just help someone down the right path, even if it's one person or 1,000 people, that's me giving a little bit back.
David Gauke's agenda is exactly that. I have been a believer in changing lives forever, and that's what the Conservative Party is about. It's not about stabilising people, it's changing their lives so they can go out and run their lives in a way that is positive to them and never come back into prison. Let's stop people recommitting crime, let's get them out stable with different lives so they can be solid members of the community. That's what it's all about.
It was an enormous privilege earlier this year to be appointed Secretary of State for Justice and Lord Chancellor. I'm the first solicitor to be Lord Chancellor. I'm also the first Lord Chancellor from my hometown of Ipswich since Cardinal Wolsey in the 16th century. Now, admittedly, it didn't end well for him. But then again, he had to undertake a very complex negotiation with a supranational European bureaucracy. Glad I don't have to do that. Being Justice Secretary is such an honour because of the type of country we are. We are a country governed by the rule of law. We value the role played by our independent judges. Our individual liberty and our economic prosperity are reliant upon the fact that that is the type of country we have long been, and that must continue to be the case. Now, this shouldn't need saying, but when a shadow cabinet minister celebrates the law-breaking militant tendency council that brought Liverpool to its knees, and a Labour MP calls for an illegal general strike, and in response the shadow Justice Secretary stands up and claps, we need to make the case for mainstream values and the rule of law. Now, fortunately, I have an excellent team working with me to fight for these values. And I'd like to thank my ministerial team, Rory Stewart, Edward Arger, and Lucy Fraser, for the fantastic work that they do. And our whip, Amanda Milling, and PPSs, Peter Heaton-Jones and Ranil Yarawadna, provide fantastic support in the House of Commons. And in the Lords, we have an outstanding team in Richard Keane as our spokesman and Charlotte Veer as whip. Thank you all. I'm also deeply grateful to the dedicated people who serve our justice system, whether in the courtroom or on the prison landing, for what you do. Whether it be prosecuting or defending the accused, supporting victims, protecting the public, or rehabilitating an offender, our country depends upon you. Thank you. Now, we were just fortunate enough to hear from Jacob, who travelled here today to share his story with us in person. We also saw on the video Ben, who had a really rough life, ended up in prison, and then with the help from Jacob and others, turned his life around. Also, we heard from Natasha Porter from Unlocked, talking about their great work attracting top talent and demonstrating the real values that prison officers bring to their roles. And of course, I'd like to pay tribute to Ian Duncan Smith, who has long been an advocate for social justice and reform. Now, we want everyone to have the opportunity of a good life, and that means being able to go about their lives free from crime. Jacob and Ben both ended up in prison, despite their different backgrounds, and both of them had a choice when they were released: return to crime or contribute to society as law-abiding citizens. We need offenders to make the right choice, to reject a life of criminality and take the opportunity to work, accept responsibility, and be part of society. Reforming the way that we get offenders to do that is my mission, and what I hope defines me as Justice Secretary. Getting prisoners rehabilitated will reduce crime and ensure there are fewer victims of crime in future. It will also cut the £15 billion cost that reoffending has on society. But to do that, we also need to deal with some very real challenges facing the prison system. That's why this summer we announced £40 million to tackle the violence in prisons that is fueled by the drugs trade, and fight the use of illicit mobile phones by gangsters on the inside. We have increased prison officer numbers by 3,500, and we will continue to recruit more. And to further crack down on drugs and violence in prison, this month we are launching a new financial crime unit, which will track and seize the money that criminal kingpins use to deal drugs in prison. My message to them is this: we are already blocking your phones, putting you in isolation, and now we will make sure you can't access your money. Dealing drugs in prison will no longer be profitable because we will find your assets and we will seize them. Our criminal justice system must protect the public and punish offenders. But if we want to bring down crime, we must also reduce reoffending. That is why I launched the Education and Employment Strategy, which will expand opportunities for offenders to get education and skills training and work experience so they can get a job when they get out. Today, I can announce that we have successfully opened up the market for prison education, increasing the number of potential providers from 4 to 12. We are systemizing offender training and employment in prison industries, such as cooking, cleaning, and maintenance across the prison estate. This builds on the success of the approach within custody and community, which we have developed with organizations such as the Clink charity. And we have agreed a formal partnership with the construction industry, led by CITB and Lend-Lease, to fill skills gaps in industry and help more prisoners do a working day during their sentence and find work on release. To further cut reoffending, we've set out our female offender strategy, using alternatives to custody where this is more effective, and providing better support to many women offenders who are themselves victims of abuse and suffering from addiction or mental health issues. We've launched pilots to make greater use of community treatment orders that address the mental health issues or substance abuse that drives someone to criminality. And we're making it easier for prisoners to keep in contact with their families by allowing access to number-restricted in-cell telephones. And it's because we want to cut reoffending that we have made the case that for minor crimes, custody should only be used as a last resort. Reoffending rates for those on short sentences are higher than for the community alternatives. Short sentences are disruptive. Offenders too often lose their jobs, lose their homes, and damage their family relationships. They are more likely to commit crimes on release. Now, I know there will be some who argue that this focus on alternatives to custody and rehabilitation is just soft justice. But I'll tell you this, if you've just been a victim of a crime, you're not going to take much comfort from the fact that the perpetrator had just spent the last 3 months locked up for most of the day and was released last week with no job, no home, no hope, and no chance. Now, let me be clear that our community sentences should not be a soft option. And that's why this summer I announced an extra £22 million per year to improve our offender supervision after they leave prison, as well as help them transition into work. Now, as a Conservative, I want everyone to reach their potential. And when I meet ex-offenders like Ben and Jacob, who have taken responsibility, who have addressed their problems, learnt the lessons, and turned their lives around, I am filled with optimism and a belief that we can do much more. We have a duty to help turn around the lives of those who accept their responsibilities and do the right thing, not just for their sakes, but for the sake of society as a whole, to reduce reoffending, to reduce the number of victims in the future. And that's why we have to give them the opportunity to reform. Now, this is especially true for young offenders. We need to ensure that we focus on turning lives round at an early stage before it is too late. And that's why we're improving the skills and training for those working in the youth justice system, including getting more graduates into the system by expanding the excellent Unlocked scheme, and giving governors greater flexibility as to how they commission youth education contracts. And today I can confirm that we are spending £5 million to introduce this country's first secure school in Medway. Secure schools are a radical new concept that places education and healthcare at the very heart of youth custody. They will be run by not-for-profit academy trusts, bringing genuine expertise, knowledge, and innovation into the youth custody sector. We'll be launching the application and selection process for the provider later this month. And we intend to construct more purpose-built secure schools in the coming years to further transform the youth estate. Now, together, this package of reforms and investment will crack down on the drugs and violence in prison, further support offenders in turning their backs on crime, and crucially, help young offenders find a path out of criminality into education and responsibility. The problems won't be solved overnight, but if we refuse to be deflected, if we stay focused on our vision, if we are driven by the evidence and prepared to be bold, if we are willing to embrace reform, this is an agenda that can turn round lives. And this is what we will deliver. Thank you very much.